today I'm going to be introducing you to the basics of progressive overload, what it is and where it comes from and how it works and how to do it with loading. And I'm going to be teaching you about the different types of progressive overload as well. So I have a very important class for you today to get you started on your journey of progressive overload. So let's start by defining progressive overload and talking about what it is and where it comes from. Progressive overload is a general phrase which basically just means adding more and more weight or volume or work to your exercise routine over time, so that you are in some way or another doing more and more as time goes on. And this is important because when you start working out with a certain volume or workload, it will produce the most stimulus and hypertrophy when you are first using it. But as you use it more and more, the amount of stimulus and hypertrophy will go down more and more over time, until eventually that amount of work is not going to be causing you to grow anymore. And as you know from learning about the law of diminishing returns, you continuing to do that same thing over time without adding to it will cause you to then hit a plateau. All right, so at that point, you will only be able to maintain your current size and athleticism with that volume. And in order to avoid reaching plateaus and to continue to grow over time, you must use progressive overload by increasing certain aspects of your volume and workload incrementally as time goes on. And this concept of progressive overload is not a new one. It actually goes back to ancient Greece. Its origin is with that ancient Greek philosopher slash scientist slash occultist that is responsible for so many schools of thought today that we have all learned about in school, Pythagoras. He's responsible for a lot of concepts in mathematics. He's responsible for other aspects of science. He's responsible for, the basics of music theory, and he had associations with the occult and secret societies. So it should come as no surprise to anyone that he was also into fitness. So now the story of the origin of the concept of progressive overload goes like this. Pythagoras had a calf, baby cow, and baby cows weigh on average about 63 pounds. And so he decided that part of his exercise regimen was going to be carrying this calf up a hill. And so he did it. And that's feasible, right? But he decided he's going to do this every single day and continue doing it as the calf grows. So he did so consistently, and as time went on, a calf grows up to be a cow, which, adult cows weigh between 1,200 and 1,500 pounds on average, depending on what they're being used for, milk or meat. And I don't know if they would weigh that much back in ancient Greek times, maybe at least 1,000 pounds. And, yet you could see how it would be conceivable for someone to, if it's just a pound a day that's getting added, would be able to, over the course of years, increase their workload that much because of that very slow and steady progressive overload that is taking place. All right, it's taking place at the same rate that the body is able to make adaptations. All right, so that is why you are able to train yourself to do these types of things over time. People might think, well, how could he possibly carry a 1,200 pound plus cow up the hill? First of all, he wouldn't be carrying it like this. He would be putting it over his shoulders. And it is, in fact, possible, especially if you are doing it with that very slow and steady progressive overload. If you started when it was a calf and continue doing this every day, it does work like that. You can increase your workload up to very large amounts. All right, so I believe that that story is true and not just a myth. Now, I know that a lot of you people today who are in this instant gratification age of, wanting to be able to just get things done now, make them happen now, might be thinking, well, is that really necessary to be doing things so slowly for so long, leading up to so much work? Can't we just find the way to get to where we want to be now? Like if I want to look like a bodybuilder, can I just do the routine that he's doing now? Can I just do one thing and, then see those results from doing that? Well, unfortunately not. And I just went over this in the last video. I know that there's a lot of YouTube videos out there that says, oh, I tried this one exercise routine for a week. I did this for 30 days and here were my results. Unfortunately, results are not going to come that quickly, and there's not just one exercise or regimen or routine or program that you can do, and then it will just, get you to where you want to be. You cannot keep doing the same thing over a long period of time and expect different results from it, all right? Einstein said that. Everyone knows that quote, I hope. And as we know from one of the first videos, there is a law of diminishing returns when you do that. So you must keep changing and increasing your stimulus in order to keep adapting and growing. And you must work harder for you to get stronger and more muscular. There must be increases to the workload, either in the amount of weight and intensity or the amount of work you are doing, aka volume. And this increase must happen slowly and steadily, consistently over time, because hypertrophy and other such adaptations that lead to strength or athleticism or whatever it may be you want are a slow process that will only create noticeable adaptations and changes to your body in a matter of months. So you need to get in as much consistent training as you possibly can, and your overload in that time should be progressive. Okay, from week to week and month to month. And you should not ever make any very sudden, large jumps in the weight you are using or other aspects of the workload, all right? And you can also not expect to keep increasing them infinitely. There are ceilings that you will hit, okay? There's like this saying out there, I think among strength trainers, there are no limits. Stuff like that is just really bad mantras for you to be thinking to yourself, that will just get you injured, okay? Because there are certainly limits, there are ceilings that you will hit, and those are different from plateaus, in that plateaus really mean that you have stopped progressing due to exercises getting stale, or due to you running into obstacles, things that can become overcome, But when I talk about ceilings, in the way we talk about age, that after you've, hit 40 years old, you have a certain ceiling come down on you where, you no longer want to be training as if you were 20. There are ceilings that you are not going to be able to bypass. There is a certain amount of weight that can be lifted by a human. There is the strongest man in the world, and everyone else is not as strong. And there's a certain level of strength that you could possibly get to. There's a certain genetic potential that you have. However, while ceilings do exist, especially for certain things, like the amount of weight that you could do or the amount of work that you can do in a single session or any single day, there aren't so many limits on progressive overload and the different ways that you can do it, and thus the different adaptations that you can continue to make. So I was recently talking to a friend of mine who does strength training, and he was telling me about how now that he's getting towards the age of 40, he's probably lifted as heavy as he ever is going to. He's probably reached his genetic potential for strength training. And I told him, I was like, that doesn't mean that there aren't a large number of other adaptations that I could help you make with different types of programming, different types of progressive overload. So if you ever do hit a plateau, or even if you think that you have hit a ceiling, do not worry, because with proper programming and proper progressive overload, you can continue to make progress in your fitness journey one way or another. Now, the key you need to understand about progressive overload, one of the big things that makes it so effective, is because it's not just about training as hard as possible. It's about training as hard as possible progressively, right? So you shouldn't be training as hard as you possibly can, lifting as heavy as you possibly can, doing as much work as you possibly can all of the time. You need to be doing these things progressively over time. So how you should be programming the work that you do is that it should start out being less work and be increasing more and more over time until you feel as though you cannot do any more. You've hit a ceiling with the amount of work that you can do at that time. And then what you want to do is take a rest period to recover from all that work and all the ways that it was taxing on your body, and then you will be able to start progressive overload again. All right, so you don't want to always be training as hard as possible. Train for where you are at in your block of progressive overload that you are doing at that time. The key to success is only training as hard as you really need to that day and leaving enough energy in your tank to be able to come back for another session tomorrow or the next day as soon as you possibly can, because you're going to be able to do more that way than if you are exhausting yourself so completely in every one session that you're then dead the next day or two, and you end up not getting in that many sessions this week. The more sessions that you can get in, the more overall volume you're doing, and with that amount of frequency, you're also going to be able to do great progressive overload with your volume.